So what we're going to talk about is how one of the use cases of Bitcoin, in addition to being freedom money, in addition to connecting anybody in the world to one open global marketplace on one currency that can't be stopped, is that it also is going to end up bringing power to every single person in Africa who doesn't have power. That's going to happen over the next few decades, and Bitcoin mining is going to do it. I was invited by Eric Hirschman and Janet and Philip and their team from Gridless to visit this remarkable place at the base of Mount Moulange. It's the highest peak in southern Africa, one of the most stunning places I've ever seen. I mean, it rivals Yosemite. There's very few people there because there's very little infrastructure there. What you see here is a little canyon, and there's a river running through it. And at that river site, about 20 years ago, the Scottish government decided to think about funding what's called a micro-hydro station. Okay, so it's like a small off-grid site where the running water is converted to electricity for the people who are nearby. Because it's what's called concessional financing, which is what powers most energy projects across the rural world, all across the planet, from Latin America to Southeast Asia, concessional financing basically just means donation. Somebody's just giving money. They don't have skin in the game. They're not going to fund OpEx. They're only going to fund CapEx. So first of all, it took them about 15 years to get this off the ground. These people in Bondo didn't have electricity until a couple years ago, because there was no skin in the game. Like the Scottish government wasn't going to make money from this venture. The incentives were not aligned. But we went up to the top of the reservoir. This is where the river comes down, and the river flows down through the turbines, and it looks like this inside the little hut. And you know what? There's just a profound problem that you realize when you visit a site like this. The people in the town and the village and the local merchants and the local businesses, they sleep every night. They don't use power at night. So there's very little power demand in the evening. But the river never sleeps. So at night, there's just all this wasted energy. And you start to realize every single energy production site on Earth wastes energy. We waste so much energy. And today, because of what Gridless is doing, there's a Bitcoin mine there. And the Bitcoin network is buying 100% of the electricity that the town and the surrounding area doesn't use. And this is completely transformative for a variety of reasons. Yeah, shout out to Gridless. So amazing. So what's happening here is a couple things. Number one, for the local power company, which used to basically be a charitable project, they're no longer paying everything out of their own pocket. They have a new source of income, which is all the Bitcoin coming in from the mining operation, from all the electricity that wasn't used before. And we're talking the majority of electricity that this place generates was going wasted, and now it's all being bought by the Bitcoin network. And here's the kicker. They're not being paid in kwacha, the currency in Malawi that's collapsing. They're being paid in cold, hard Bitcoin and sats directly to their offices. They don't need to deal with accountants and paperwork and Forex. No, they just get Bitcoin. It's incredibly powerful for these people. So it allows them to have capital. Now, the local power company can think about building, and they are expanding, and they're going to connect more homes. Gridless, the company that owns the miners, they're also winning. They're going to come in, and within a year or two at these sites, they're profitable, which is amazing. And number three, most importantly, probably for most of you, the local residents. Now, the local residents, we got to meet the chieftains of the village at a meeting. It was very special. It was very profound. And what's really amazing is they're paying less now for the electricity. What happens, it's sort of counterintuitive. The media will tell you, oh, the Bitcoin miners are coming in and they're making electricity more expensive. That's completely false. That's not what happens at all. What's actually happening here is that because the power company can only sell about 20% of what it makes to the local population because there's just not that much demand, it ends up charging 5 times more for the price. So these guys are paying 80 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity in the middle of nowhere, even though they're surrounded by energy. Meanwhile, here in the States, I know the prices have been going up lately, but in the advanced democratic world, we pay, I don't know, anywhere from 10 to 30 cents. So despite the fact that they're so poor and vulnerable, they're paying way more than us. This doesn't make any sense. We were led to believe that we are in progress around the world. Electricity and technology was supposed to get cheaper. For them, it's getting more expensive. And Bitcoin changes that, and it's so profound. And look, they weren't Bitcoin experts, but they knew what it was doing to their community, and they knew that electricity was the thing that mattered almost the most. I mean, the stories they told us about how it's changed their town. I mean, children that couldn't study at night. They had to try. They are now, the rate at which their children are now getting into the good schools has skyrocketed since they got electricity. They no longer have to walk to surrounding villages 20 kilometers to get medicine. Funnily enough, the men who used to go to town to watch football, they can be at home with their families and really build family and build community. So, Bitcoin is changing everything for this little town. And this is just one example of what is happening all across Africa and soon all across the developing world. And one of the most interesting things that I sort of observed here is when you go to the back of the Bitcoin mine, you put your hand up, it's a furnace. It's so hot. The externality of Bitcoin mining is heat. It's just a heater. The Bitcoin miner just turns electricity into heat. That's really what it's doing, right? So people are smart, and they figured out, wait a second, we can actually use that. So what you're seeing here is 1,000 miles north of Malawi in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Virunga National Park, which is where the silverback gorillas are, and 5 million people live in this park in the surrounding regions. You'll see a couple Bitcoin miners there talking to a guy who runs Virunga National Park, the Conservancy. And the park is pretty smart. In 2020, they started mining Bitcoin with the excess energy they had from their hydro stations. So they've done very well, and it's been a lifeline for the park. But additionally, in the area, they have a lot of other things they make. But what you see behind them is cocoa. So cocoa is taken and it's like put out on these mats. And there's like animals and birds and wind, and they're trying to dry it, but it's not very effective, right? And it's not even sanitary enough to be sold to EU markets. So what happens is they were like, look, we're going to buy $200,000 of industrial heaters so that we can actually sell this stuff and make more money. Our friends, the Bitcoin miners, were like, no, don't do that. Buy $200,000 of ASICs instead. And that's what they did. And now they're processing cocoa way faster, way more efficiently, and it turns into this beautiful chocolate, which I was able to eat. It's incredible. This chocolate is made by Bitcoin mining. I visited sites in Norway where the externality of all the hydro mining they do is drying seaweed for consumption around the world. So you kind of have to understand that in the future, it's not going to just be cost of Bitcoin mining and profit of Bitcoin mining. It's going to be profit of Bitcoin mining plus profit of the externality minus the cost. And this is going to change everything. I encourage you to watch a Reason documentary about a bathhouse in Brooklyn that's heating the spa where you go with Bitcoin mining. The Bitcoin miners are submersed in a liquid, and they run and they create heat, and they heat the water of the spa. And this is the coolest part. The guy who runs the spa is paying less for power now than he did before, plus he's mining Bitcoin. So this is just going to revolutionize everything. What you start to realize is if you're not mining Bitcoin, you're wasting energy. And that's the exact opposite of what the media tells you. I also got an opportunity to visit a geothermal site in Kenya. So this is just very simple. They dig a very deep hole in the ground. Heat comes up. It turns into steam. It spins a turbine. This thing is going to generate the same amount of power for the next 40 years. Clean, consistent, renewable, carbon-free, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they have so much of it in Kenya. It's one of the world's largest sources of geothermal power. It's right on the Rift Valley. And, one thing I learned when I was there, was really surprised by, is Kenya is the world's largest exporter of flowers. So what happens is they take the geothermal or the hydro, and they power pumps like this, which is on a lake. And they pump the water to a field, and they grow flowers, and they sell it to Europe or wherever. And that's like how the country, earns income, essentially. And, what's amazing is that you start to realize there's no grid here. So it's not like they can sell the excess power to somebody else. No. This is like rural Kenya. And on the right, you'll see a shack that has the pump inside. And the pump's not on all the time, right? The pump's pumping sometimes, not pumping other times. But the geothermal power is constant. It's always coming. It's always coming. So on the left, and we'll just kind of zoom in here, that's a Starlink, and that's sitting on top of a Bitcoin mine. And the most amazing thing is that this thing is buying, again, 100% of the power that the pump's not using. So all of a sudden, we've eliminated waste, and we are going to become much more efficient as a species. And honestly, it's going to create so much abundance because it's going to unlock people's ability to use all the electricity sources around them. So you can see inside, we got some miners here. This is so cool. What Gridless does is everything's made in Africa. Like the whole design they have, everything's made in Africa. And this is like a chart on one of the founder's phones he was showing me, where if you look at this thing and there's this green line going up and down, above the red, that's all when the Bitcoin mining machines are turned on. So they're mining whenever that green line goes above the red line. And when it goes below the red line, the machines aren't on. And it's just this dynamic, flexible power demand source that's paying the company that runs the station, it's paying Gridless, and it's reducing the cost of power for anyone else in the region. I mean, it's sort of magical, but that's what Bitcoin mining is. But it's not just going to solve issues in Kenya or in Malawi. it's going to solve issues here too. So this is I live in California, and this is a chart that I was really shocked by. So this is from the California, grid, basically. And between 2019 and 2023, in America, we use the word curtailment instead of waste because it's sort of like a euphemism, right? Curtailed. But we were wasting millions of megawatt hours of energy. So, I mean, this is massive amounts of energy that we are wasting in our country. And, just to give you an idea, in 2021, my state curtailed 1,500 kilowatt hours of solar and wind. That's enough to power 220,000 homes for a year. In the Southwest power region, which is sort of in the middle of the country, nearly 6,300 kilowatt hours of wind was curtailed. That's enough to power 600,000 homes for a year. And, this is not just American problem, it's a problem all over the world. The UK, get this, the UK spent 500 million pounds wasting wind energy in 2021. How insane is that? And the crazy part is Bitcoin fixes this. We don't need to do this anymore. We can just run all of this renewable energy all the time, and whatever isn't bought by whoever is there, the Bitcoin network is going to buy and turn into capital for more growth and more abundance, and so we can continue to grow as a civilization. This is a chart from a book called Resistance Money. I really would encourage you to pick up a copy. It's a phenomenal book. And what you see here in the white is how much energy Bitcoin consumes, right? So compared to like air conditioning, the big one, chemicals, iron and steel. The difference is, as I've been trying to explain, Bitcoin mining saves wasted energy. So, I know that the media and the government want you to look at this and be like, oh my God, this is terrible. Bitcoin mining uses so much energy. We actually want that circle to be as big as possible, because the bigger Bitcoin mining is, the healthier we are going to be as a society. I wanted to sort of dive into this a little bit. This is something some of you may have seen, this image. And people always say, well, we could always create a solar grid the size of this square and power the world in the Sahara Desert. Well, you can't do that because that's not how solar energy works. Now, fossils do work that way, right? So you can dig fossils out of the ground in Algeria, and in fact, a lot of that powers all kinds of stuff in the United States. And the interesting thing here is that fossils are more modular, right? So fossils, we don't tend to waste. We're not going to just waste a bunch of fossil fuels. We use them, and we use them carefully. And when the oil exporters sense that the market is weak, they stop digging it out of the ground. There's a much sort of tighter relationship with fossils and the way we use fossils. So long term, fossils aren't necessarily really going to power Bitcoin mining. What Bitcoin mining is going to feast on is renewable energy and baseload power, like nuclear and potentially, of course, hydro and geothermal, biomass. I mean, because God controls that stuff. We don't. It's sunny, it's not sunny, it's windy, it's not windy. We can't control that. But Bitcoin it can buy everything that's consumed. So this is something we're going to start to understand. And look, these countries, if they wanted to, they could turn all that stuff into capital with Bitcoin mining. And I want us to sort of try to rewire our brains here. So this is a New York Times article, where they're trying to scare you about Bitcoin mining. And they're saying, Bitcoin uses more electricity than many countries. How is that possible? Well, what if they said this? What if they said Bitcoin saves more electricity than many countries? That's super exciting, right? Here's another one. Bitcoin consumes more electricity than Argentina. Oh my God, that's horrible. Well, what if Bitcoin saves more electricity than Argentina? That's incredible, right? So we need to rewire our brains and understand that one of the most profound use cases for Bitcoin is saving wasted energy and understanding that, listen, man, if you're not mining Bitcoin, you're wasting energy. So that's sort of the deal. Just to conclude, that today and yesterday combined is sort of one big talk about all the use cases of Bitcoin that you may not hear about. Again, we understand savings, but there are so many use cases for this thing that's so valuable. And the fact that Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and all these people, Jamie Dimon, they get up there and they tell you it's useless. The Fed tells you it's useless. The Atlantic magazine tells you it's useless. They're either gaslighting you or they're just ignorant. It is so useful to so many people around the world, whether it be because they don't have the financial privilege that we have. They don't have access to the dollar economy. They don't have access to the stock markets. They just might have terrible paper money that collapses. Their savings technology might be sheet metal or cows. For so many people in this world, that is the technology they're using to save, and Bitcoin dramatically upgrades them. And again, the commercial aspect of it, think even just about remote work, when you have got an international company, you're paying somebody in some other country, it's such a nightmare to pay them. Bitcoin just cuts through all that nonsense, and it can really empower so many people in that sense. It's so bad for dictators. It is something that transfers power from the state to the people, and that's something that they are very scared of. As we move through this transitionary time, it's going to be more clear that only countries that have values like property rights, free speech, and open capital markets are going to be able to coexist with Bitcoin. So Tennessee can definitely coexist with Bitcoin, but the CCP cannot. So that's just something to think about as we move forward. And then finally, again, Bitcoin saves wasted energy. Now, I'll conclude with something here. How do we feel about ESG investing? What do we think? Okay, down, yeah, okay. Well, here's the funny part, though. If we actually think about what Bitcoin is, Bitcoin, from an environmental point of view, reduces energy waste and expands green power. Bitcoin, from a social point of view, is the best possible investment you could ever make. It expands financial inclusion, and it promotes human rights in every corner of the world where no one else is willing to help. And we're talking about North Korea, Gaza, all over, Venezuela, places that no aid organization can reach, places that no one really cares about due to whatever reason. Bitcoin is there every day helping people. It is such a profoundly good thing for you to invest in. And from a government's point of view, it's neutral and it's incorruptible. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. No bureaucrat can change that. No one can inflate it if they want to. It's one open standard for everyone. So kind of the funniest thing here is that for all this talk about ESG, Bitcoin is the best ESG investment on the planet. And the funny thing is, we're gonna start to figure this out. Okay, so it's already happening, right? So we have the former president of the United States about to come speak. We have governors. The governor of Tennessee came and spoke at a Bitcoin event yesterday with someone from the Tennessee Valley Authority and one of the senators from this great state. We have nations mining Bitcoin, not just what I showed you today. The government of Kenya is turning its waste into Bitcoin. The government of Ethiopia is doing this. There are all kinds of governments mining all around the world. This thing's already starting to happen. So we're seeing political adoption. We're seeing, of course, we have Wall Street adoption, and we have nation-state mining adoption. This is happening. So this is not something for you to sleep on. And again, it's so profoundly exciting because it provides us a new way to progress as humans where we don't have to rely on altruism. The reason why there's 600 to 700 million people without power in Africa today is because it requires altruism to give them power. It requires them to make a donation where they're not going to get anything back in a capitalistic sense. Bitcoin completely rewires the situation. It completely changes the system where now people are going to come in and give power to all those other people, and they're going to make money doing it. So it's basically this incredible machine that turns self-interest into freedom. And I couldn't be more happy to be here to help talk through these things with you guys. I hope to see you next time. Thanks so much, Nashville.